We want to get onto one of the panels that I've been really looking forward to, since we actually designed AREDAY 11, and while some of the characters have changed in terms of what's in the printed manual, we do want to acknowledge that Daniel Wildcat has become Keelani Souza.
I am a dear and personal friend of Daniel Wildcat's, and we work together in education, so I'm going to try and slide into my Daniel Wildcat mindset and give you the things he might have known. And we work on a lot of programs together. So.
And thank you for substituting. And then also, I want to welcome back our good friend Brad Tyndall, who is the Senior VP over at Colorado Mountain College. And it's really great that you can join us, because this panel is about accelerating climate and energy literacy and how that equates to jobs. And so John Ramo is a dear friend, colleague, and partner in this. He has a company called Digital Directions, one of the leading online content producers of educational programming, has been doing that for a number of years, and very successfully so with, I believe, PBS. And I'll let John talk a little bit more about that. I think I'd like everybody to briefly introduce, but Alice Bedard Voorhees, is that right? Okay, and she is an educator, PhD, who has been working with Colorado Community College for a number of years, providing program content curricula. Janie Chase, obviously you just heard from, and her commitment to green education. Brad, so maybe why don't we just start with John? Could you just brief intro of who you are, what you do, and why you're here, and keep it short, please.
Sure. I've known Chip for many years, and really excited to be here and with the good work that Chip's done and be part of the ACELI program. Digital Directions, we're a developer and publisher of digital content and educational interventions for K through 12. I got started in environmental education a number of years ago when worked with John Denver on an EPA program called In Partnership with Earth back in the 90s, and with my wife Jolie. And we also developed the first encyclopedia of the environment called Earth Explorer in collaboration with the American Association of the Advancement of Science and the Apple Computer. It's still being sold in the CD-ROM form. And then most recently, we've developed the Help Math program to enable STEM learning, math learning for Hispanic English language learners, because as you know, the demographics are changing in our schools, and these students need a lot of support. So we basically develop tools to enable students to overcome difficulties in the language, and it's the first research proven program that increases math learning by 70%, as evidenced by the U.S. Department of Education that funded this. So we're very interested in working with Chip and ACELI in order to advance the cause of environmental education and literacy.
Great, thanks, John. And before we go on, I want to just, so anybody who doesn't know in the room what ACELI is, it's one of our 5 programs at AREI, and it stands for the American Climate and Energy Literacy Initiative. And what that is it's a program designed to partner industry with community colleges to create jobs in the clean technology sector. It's about job forecasting and by design. And so let's go down the line. Alice, would you mind telling us?
I have been working in adult learning and workplace as well as academic training or effective learning to change behavior for 40 years. And my passion is in looking at the work looking at ACELI's goals is how does the goals of ACELI, how does our urgency to change behavior, how does that connect to industry standards in renewable, and how will that forward employment and job creation among those sectors. So I've done a variety of projects. Some of my most recent and exciting ones relate to compliance training for a whole county in form of an online game. I worked with the interoperability project, which was to cross-train first responders for big events like the fires and floods in Colorado, and that was for Colorado Homeland Security, and have deep and long relationship with our partner in this valley, Colorado Mountain College, which covers 12,000 square miles. I was most excited also to hear about Janie's work today, because creating a sense of future in K-12 and hope with that future and engagement in community is critical to everything we're talking about here.
Great. And maybe Brad, you could just briefly reintroduce yourself to the folks.
All right. I am Brad Tyndall. I'm at the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Colorado Mountain College. My history with renewable energy goes back to 1984 as a Peace Corps volunteer on a renewable energy project in the Sudan. And then I went back to school, got a master's and a PhD in environmental economics. I came from, before I came to Colorado Mountain College, I was at Crowder College in Missouri, and we had the state's training center for renewable energy. It's Missouri Alternative Renewable Energy Technology Center, Merit. And did a lot of job training, and I'm excited to be on this panel, and there's a lot of important work that we need to do, and we need to do it quickly. So, Sally, accelerate this, baby. This is what we need.
Great. Thank you. Now, I'd also like Keelani, and I think we'll come back to you, Janie, just for a brief re-intro. But Keelani, and particularly I'm interested in how we can connect up the ACELI program with the indigenous perspective, included in terms of the amount of community colleges. And I think there's 1,700 community colleges, for the record, in the nation. And how many of those are located on tribal reservations, not only in Hawaii, but also mainland? So maybe you could just do a quick...
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are 29 tribal colleges we're working with, and there are also some colleges that are unusually, for example, Dartmouth, it's within their charter that they educate Native Americans. And so there are indigenous portals, if you will, that exist even beyond the tribal colleges. Dene College in the Four Corners is a fabulous institution, Menominee, where they work, environmental service, science learning. And those jobs are all focused on moving them. And I was glad to hear you about the STEM programs, because we do a lot of those programs within the context of our indigenous learning. In the Pacific, in particular, because we're not tribes, we actually have charter schools and charter colleges that do immersion language learning, and very much into nature learning. Recently, in the last 2 years, we opened it up for other than just indigenous students, and the classroom sizes have almost tripled, and the experiences we're having. We have partners like NOAA, National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, with NASA, with NSF, National Science Foundation, and we're really focused on environmental service learning.
Great. And in terms of the ACELI program, while we state up front that we are developing with community colleges, I want to let everybody know that we're also have programs that are designed for K through 12 as well as universities, but launching and specifically focused on the community college aspect. And also, for anybody who doesn't know, and I'm sure you all do, but STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math, and that's a national core standard. And then we also have STEAM, where they've added arts, because that's becoming very important to balance that out with arts, and they're finding that by adding arts.
Always.
Yes.
Always.
Right, and STEAM is really what we are moving towards, because they're finding that when they hire people with the arts element, that they get more productivity in the institutional and corporate. So go ahead, Janie, you want to just jump back in and
well, I just had a lot of time. I don't know if I need to take any more. We can keep the discussion.
Okay, well, we want to connect all the dots here, and that's what we're here to do. So,
well, I'll say one thing that I neglected to say. I'm sorry. I take it back. Teachers, in-service teachers. I think what we do, because this is very specific, the teachers feel intimidated to teach a lot of what we're talking about because they're not educated in it. And so what we've been doing is sort of holding their hands and team teaching. And what's really exciting, it doesn't take that long. And they take off. They start going home and doing their own research and coming back and saying, hey, I want to talk about this. So, just getting things started, but in-service teachers, a way to them is something that I think is really important.
Great. I just want to kick this whole conversation off with the preface that when President Obama asked Joe Biden to head up the initiative at the White House on community college engagement and job creation, the Vice First Lady, I guess, is that what you call her?
Jill. First
Just
Vice
call her
Lady.
Jill.
The First Lady of Vice. Well, anyway, she was a perfect choice, obviously, as a lifelong educator, and I know that they're working really hard to try to crack that nut. But we at AREI, I think I speak for myself and the board, firmly believe that we've got to move very quickly now to the implementation phase of all of the things that we've been saying here over the past 3 days, and that this is one of the major vehicles that will enable us to do that. And that is partnering with industry and creating curricula that satisfies their criteria for job hires, and then partnering with institutions in order to deliver workers into the workforce. And so, the more that we can have those kinds of dialogues around clean energy, that's of course the qualifier here, that we're going to be able to really implement all of the systems that we're talking about here in a way that's going to be very attractive to industry and satisfy the function of the community college. And why we're focusing on community college is that's where communities go into vocation as well as on to higher institutions of learning. So maybe starting with Brad down there, I know that Colorado Mountain College, I think, is on in 7 counties, and you have 11 campuses. Maybe I'm wrong.
7 campuses and 11 locations. Yeah.
Okay,
right.
and that you have a 4-year degree now in sustainability. You talked about that a little earlier. Maybe you can talk from your perspective on the importance of how we can rapidly move into the clean tech job creation.
I think that the rapid part is, it's like singing with the choir here, is that there's a dire need. As I said on Sunday, I think we're in a petri dish where the petri dish is seriously sick in terms of illnesses, and energy is a big part of the driver for environmental catastrophe. So we have to move quickly. I mean, you hear all the timelines we're all familiar with. By this date, something very bad is going to happen. By this date, no more polar bears. By this date. So we have to move very, very rapidly, and it has to be in a way that is economic. And so I think that the big disservice that we can do at the community college or elsewhere is just crank out the same old kind of students, one. So we have to start creating the jobs and the knowledge set for a new economy. And the trick is, of course, part of the new economy isn't there. And so I know there's a lot of ideas here in terms of how we help this transition, but it's not as simple as cranking out 500 solar grads and they'll say, okay, 5 of them or 10 of them will get jobs. What do you do with the rest of them? Well, there are strategies for this transition. And I won't go into too much, but there's definitely a dire need. So at Colorado Mountain College, our primary learning objective for all graduates, whether they have 4-year degrees or 2 years degree, is sustainability, and part of that is energy literacy. It's just that important for the globe and also for the job market. We find that when our students come out and they know something about building energy management, that's the skill, the hook that gets them the job. Because people are saying, yeah, I believe in all that sustainability stuff, but what skills do you have? I need this now. Do you know spreadsheets, and you can help with the books and help us with determining what we can do to save energy? Great. So a lot of this, I would say, kind of one of my main points is kind of job hedging or skill hedging, we had just very quickly in Missouri, we had a solar energy program, technician program. And this was at that Merit Center. And we found out there just weren't that many wind jobs. There was all these projections, but it's a funny thing. There will be more wind jobs, but if you dump a whole lot of first generation community college students on the market and they can't get a job, you're hurting families and generations of families. You have to be very careful. So what we found was, in talking a little bit to Alice before we got in here, is kind of how much of the skill set do you embed in a degree. And so long story short, the job hedge or skill hedge for wind was train people to be industrial technicians, industrial maintenance, because every single building in the country and the world requires industrial maintenance. And then you tag on the wind skills, and you know they'll get a job. And the second the wind job opens up, they step right in. So it was a lot of that very strategic, getting the right set of skills, because if you're the parent and you say they got a degree in wind and there's no jobs, they want to kill you. Say, no, we figured this out. They will get a job and they're ready to position in. So anyhow, it's very critical, and it's up for us in education to figure out how to make it all work.
So to piggyback on that, CMC is one of the 430-some colleges that are part of the seedcenter.org site, or not site, but community, which is funded by the American Association of Community Colleges. And it is a whole commitment when a college joins them. And what it includes is the president's pledge to not only prepare people, in education for the job market, but it's also a commitment of the college to make it self-sustainable. Has some excellent resources in there to help colleges. Also, when we talk about it provides success stories and shared practices among the partner colleges. So one thing that has become evident, I think, for all of us here is to realize we have, resources to really spike our efficiencies in preparing people for the market. And there are 4 components. And one of the components is what educational community is already here to forward ACELI's work or to partner with ACELI. And also to look at, when you were talking about the standards, because I have been doing research on the various standards that exist in the different industries. What the research tells us is that NABCEP is the only one of the ANSI standard groups that actually provides standards for installers. The wind people have standards for the devices, renewable biofuels, some of those other groups. They all have standards for the devices. That is of value in the educational realm when you are preparing students in your own curriculum. However, people also teach those things in different sequences, and so John and I have had quite a discussion about this, and that is the value of additional educational content will be around those industrial standards so that employers can see what students know or can show relative to those standards when they are hiring them. But that brings us to the next piece, and that is employers need to come to the tables. People who are already doing career tech education have as a practice employer advisory groups. But when, we need more than that. Employer advisory groups also need to bring the funds. I think that, I'm trying to think who said this yesterday, that some of the issues with the new technologies is that A, the public doesn't know how to adopt them, but also B, what are the industries that are bringing the new technologies doing to bring them to the institutions that are preparing the workforce, as well as bringing the employers who know, hey, I can get students or I can get future employees from there who know the standards and have used the technologies that we want to bring forward.
Great. It sounds like we're gonna get there. We're just gonna have to wrangle our way through quite a complicated system. that we call the U.S. Educational system here.
Well, it is
You know,
about
because
systems approach. It
Yeah,
is.
no, I hear that. And in order to get the funding, though, we're going to have to really be showing them dynamically how this will, in fact, create jobs and satisfy the industry requirements. Kalani, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing out in the Pacific Rim that is relevant or similar to this strategy? Have you had any
Well, we've been
successes there?
Yeah, Kohala Center, a rather large nonprofit, and our nonprofit, Olohana, we've been working hand in hand with Yale Forestry and with Cornell. And what we do is we build the connectivity between the high school students in our immersion schools directly with the post-grad students who are doing their research. We happen to have a very fortunate situation in that the Big Island of Hawaii is where most geoscience research occurs in the world. So all the major universities are there, and they're trying to do their research. I mean, clearly the atmospheric research started there in the 50s, and we're continuing. So we're building pathways for these students. We're building them through the relationships that they're getting by working with the master's students, the postgrad students, and then working with the professors from those colleges who come down. So the students in our high schools are actually assisting with the research monitoring and assisting with the learning, and therein piquing their interest about moving into science, into various fields: hydrology, volcanism, atmospheric science, ocean science, climate research, habitat restoration research, which become large projects. And so that trend's been going pretty good for about 20 years. And we see native students now who are, in fact, holding their PhDs and have taken over whole departments and running them because they come with their indigenous knowledge intact. This is why for the last 12 years, I've been working with the federal government, particularly NOAA, around the interface of indigenous science and modern science. We refer to them that way because we consider that knowledge to be science. It's done through observation, through experimentation. What succeeds worked. And the reason we know that they were successful is because I'm still here. And if my ancestors had not been successful, the chair would be empty. And so we know that how we've seen the world, and we have some adaptation strategies that even the UN has pointed out are really hugely effective. So these programs are ongoing, but here's an interesting wrinkle: job creation. What we started doing in the last 2 years, and I've been working with NOAA. They've given my organization, Olohana, a couple of not very large grants, 100,000 a year. But we've been working on some pilot programs for that program I call the Partnership for an Adaptive America. So we're doing climate mitigation and preparation for large weather events while we're doing habitat restoration and creating food capacity on the ground. And this field of play that runs along the coastlines and is a national historic trail, so we got DOI and NPS all up in this too, becomes the campus for our students because nature learning is critical. And we focus K through 12, and that's not true. We have a pedagogy of education that we use in indigenous communities, and we're transferring that to the native tribes. We call it a pedagogy of aloha. So we used to start by bringing in teachers from outside, and we found out that they couldn't resonate with the indigenous communities. So what we do now, because community is so critical to what we do, we find community members like the aunts and the grandmothers and the uncles who are interested in the students, and then we train them and certify them as teachers. So now they're teaching, and they're not complaining about needing to go home at 5 o'clock. They're working till 9 p.m. at night if they have to. These are their children.
That's brilliant.
You know what I mean? And it's really showed some results. And I think we can do that everywhere in the country. Tell me a parent or a grandparent that doesn't care about what's happening with their child in the school system. So this is just the beginning of it. The field of play for the kids in the nature deficit learning as they're learning eco-service and learning with scientists, alongside scientists, and sharing what they know. Now, the brilliant thing is the jobs we're creating are the jobs for the returning veterans who come back and then get employed in the habitat restoration work and find themselves going into mentoring positions with the students, which is a brilliant healing both for the the returning military and for the students and the community themselves. The Romans used to require you to decompress at the temples of Diana for 1 hour for every day you served in their war. Right, if they knew that 2,000 years ago, what's our problem? Right, since we know that historically. So this PTSD problem we have, really we've learned from Vietnam that nature learning, peer counseling in a natural setting is one of the best ways to step down, and we could do it without stigmatizing them with PTSD. And we could identify, which is what we're working with at home, identify those that need more clinical help. We get them into process, but those that don't, we can take care of them in the community and give them a job, employ them when they come home. So there's all kinds of ways to look at how climate and eco-service learning can serve community capacity building. We just have to be really more innovative and more inclusive.
Do not worry.
No.
Thank you. I want to call on Janie here for a minute to connect the dots with her work, and then we're going to go to John.
Well, two things I just want to pick up on that you were talking about. One is mental health that you just brought up. And that's, I think, I just have to say that we should all be, you know, I've got to mention Robin Williams.
Yes.
You know, he was a
Yes.
friend, and I'm going to do it without cracking. But anyway, we all need to think about that because it's prevalent. Yes. And we don't talk about it enough. It's stigmatized. There's mental health. There are mental health issues in my family. And anyway, so I just want to bring that up. I love that you brought that up because, and then the intergenerational. I mean, what are we thinking? We take our old people and we put them all together with each other in these places and we don't visit them. Yes. It's insane.
It is.
I mean, that's our knowledge, that's our wealth. So we do try to do that as well in our schools. And we love those models.
Okay, so how, John, can we take what Kehlani said, what Janie said, what Brad and Alice have said, okay, and then use systems thinking to integrate that into the ACELI architecture?
Well, the way my observation is, well, first of all, environmental literacy should start ground zero, you know, and we need to do more at every stage of development, at every point in the educational system. But when we get to the community college level, the way I think about it is that what we really need is sort of connective tissue between community college and the job world, and to me that indicates sort of development of a platform strategy. And a platform strategy would be, for instance, to have online courses and tools, also have sort of an iTunes type of content approach that would allow instructors to pick and choose and bring that content into their work on a customized basis, because that's another big trend in education is personalization and customization. And that's one of the things that we've worked on with our Help Math program, is that teachers can customize lessons. They can find where the learning gaps are, and then they can customize the content to allow the student to overcome those learning gaps. So I think that putting it together, what we really need is a set of tools and that would form the basis of having a system that would allow students to overcome the learning gaps, to be able to collaborate, very importantly, collaborate on project-based learning, and then also to have the connectivity with industry through the standards-based learning. And I think that can be achieved very, very nicely through a platform approach.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of a no-nonsense person. If I have a beer in me, a few four-letter words crop out like, no nonsense, let's get down to business. But I think the system that if we have 20 years to kind of figure this out and get all education up to speed, then we'd be fine. But we don't have 20 years. And so what we have now is a system where every single college in the country applies for a National Science Foundation grant. We get $150,000. we all dabble, we all start building our own curriculum, and every single community college, those 1,700 that Chip mentioned, everybody's working on this on their own by and large. And we ain't going to get there. That's just not an efficient way to address the crises at hand. And so, yeah, I like what John is saying. I mean, basically, if you have, like your iPad, you have all these different applications. Like, if you could take solar installation and solar thermal and different things and have different little mini apps on it, you could very easily tag on to an industrial maintenance degree. You would also be a solar expert. Boom. Tag on certain modules. Boom, you're ready for wind. I mean, and everybody figuring this out on their own, every university, every community college, everybody getting a grant, is just not an effective way of doing it. Frankly, we need a really comprehensive, oh my God, we don't have much time left approach rather than, I mean, we love our local autonomy and we like everybody applying, you know, but every college I go to, everybody's developing the same solar.
Is that happening at all? Is anyone doing that?
There's some. There is some. And there are people, like organizations like SEED that said, hey, let's get some standards there. But still, there's, on the ground, there's a whole lot of people just kind of pulling some resources in, and it's getting better. But from personal experience, you know, we applied for an NSF grant. And this summer, I hired somebody to work on energy literacy. I'm thinking, yeah, there's other tools out there, but at some point, if what is there is not ready to go, beautiful iPad down for an app, it's still a pain in the rear. I was looking at, just a few days ago, someone said, hey, for energy literacy, let's look at this website. And I looked at it, there's probably 5% of it I liked. And I said, that's not good enough, you know? So, yeah. I mean, really, the need is dire. And we don't have, it's not effective for a national policy to have every single community college trying to figure it out on their own. There's a beauty to some of it because you work with your local industry. You say, hey, what do you need? Okay, what are the exact skill sets? We'll have a little bit of wind in there just in case. That piece is good, working with your partners, but everyone having to sit down and design their own curriculum. And we hired a web designer and what we call instructional, help me here, instructional designer. Mm-hmm. They can program it and make these cool things. And every school's hiring 3 instructional designers. And I'm going, oh, for crying in the bucket, let John do it and let's get going.
Is that something that a Sally could take on? No.
Well, you know, we're possibly.
Or should.
How much time do we have left? Okay, because I want to save some time for Q&A. So in terms of, you know, systems thinking is really one of the things that I think has to be incorporated. And I'm sure everybody in the room knows what that means. But the way I interpret it is that the waste of one product becomes the fuel for the next. And it goes around, and all of a sudden you have a closed loop. So, and it's the way Mother Nature does it. Now, if we can start to apply that to the design of curricula and the design of industry needs in terms of productivity, which is what a lot of my colleagues are really starting to come up with. So, you know, maybe back to Kalani, because I mean, I think indigenous wisdom really has been taking that into consideration, you know, pretty much from the get-go.
It's, you know, we always call the learning womb to tomb, you know, because it never stops in the indigenous world. And it's interesting, you know, I struggled for quite some years around this intersection of indigenous knowledge and modern science. And I am myself, I'm a product of a traditional household and then sent to Punahou and, you know, on into the college world to get the other perspective. I used to teach postgrad students around conflict resolution and, you know, planning at the university, and I like the kindergartners a lot more. You know, I find myself out in the field. And I actually think the critical moment is somewhere around 11, somewhere around the 5th grade. Yeah. You know, so I'm trying to focus the initiatory experience in that 5th through 9. You know, that curriculum that actually sets them on the pathway to technology jobs, or identifies them as people that are moving into agricultural jobs or social jobs, you know, these different sort of trends that happen and the thinking in their mind. We like to let the child sort of show us their natural direction. We have programs, part of our campuses, and it's unusual in Hawaii because all of our community colleges are attached to the University of Hawaii. So we have the university campuses that are on the several different islands, and then the community colleges on several different islands, all kind of sharing curricula, you know what I mean, and sharing resource. And I know it's not that way everywhere. I mean, Hawaii is the only state that only has one superintendent of education. And we're the only state that has like 8 islands. So it doesn't make any sense to us like how that's working out that way. It would seem that we would have one for each island, but we don't. And so we share resources in that way, and it's kind of built in culturally. But back to the intersection of indigenous knowledge and modern science. You know, trying to develop these data sets, like we talked about integrating them, was an interesting experiment. But we're finding now that it's better if we gift the student with both sets of learning. The innovation happens within the student. You know what I mean? The integration, the innovation is coming from the student themselves, who are using these two really quite disparate systems of learning. You know what I mean? But they're beginning to create new things. So we're teaching indigenous knowledge now on apps in programs, right? So we're taking wisdom from our elders, and the new kids are learning how to write program apps to install that into their laptops and their tablets, so that it attracts the fourth grader quicker than the idea of going out into the bushes with grandma, Kanani or whatever. So I mean, it's happening.
Indigenous apps.
Yes, and Daniel would term this indigenuity, and indigenosity, right? Taking your indigenosity and using a little bit of indigenuity and finding a way to seam that. I always think it's an and thing, right? It's never an either or thing. It's like we just have to get comfortable in our diversity, in the approaches that we use.
What strikes me is that what you're doing is really the root of the word education. It comes from the Latin educo, means to lead out. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're leading out the indigenous and marrying that with the scientific world, external scientific world.
So I think that we've now come up with the fundamental philosophical construct, the underpinning construct of the ACELI program, which we had before, but this is really something that I want to integrate as we move forward, and put in writing, and then also remember that we at AREI are all about forming partnerships, collaborations, and mutually beneficial efforts that are going to benefit everybody. I mean, that's really the paradigm. So I think at this point, if there's a microphone out there, I know that Andy has a question over here. Why don't we start there, and then we can begin to queue up.
I've been privileged to be working on ACELI with most of the folks up here. And I want to comment briefly on the jobs component and the financing component. The current budget for the ACELI curriculum is $3 million. We are now actively engaged in securing underwriting for the development and implementation of this program. The jobs component is a piece that will be offered to community colleges at a given level of subscription to the various components offered. We will intend to put that in place by part of the financing mechanism. We will be approaching large corporate enterprises that produce the things that are used in producing the green economy. We will be asking them to supply, as a form of working capital, very liberal trade terms to smaller contractors and those who will employ the graduates of this program. They will also be asked to help supply certain levels of scholarship aid so that these students, even in a 2-year program, are not further burdened with excessive levels of student debt, which is another national crisis in our educational system. I just wanted to add that comment because no one had touched on it, Chip, and so I apologize.
Thank you so much for doing so. And if anybody doesn't know Andy Quiet, he serves as a secretary and one of the corporate officers of the American Renewable Energy Institute, and we're sure glad that you do. So the next question is over here. Let's go with the man in front.
Thanks, everybody. I'm glad that NABCEP was mentioned. I'm a solar installer. We have boots on the roof. We've got employees. We hire people from these community colleges. And NABCEP certification is the gold standard. I'm on the board of directors of NABCEP. And it requires not only education, but also service learning, actual practice. Not quite an apprenticeship, but hands-on experience. So I want to know, is that on your radar? A lot of these students that are going into this field are not traditional learners or tactile kinesthetic. They're hands-on people that would maybe go into the trades, years ago. Now they're going to go into the solar and the renewable trades. So is there, I guess, that kind of training and hands-on experience and apprenticeship and internship, is that part of the best practices?
Is Chris Ellis in this room? Chris is one of the CMC renewable energy folks, and is he here?
Well, he's not, but
No,
he is out front, and everybody should know that that van out there is very relative to this conversation, because it shows Colorado Mountain College's commitment to engaging with the certifications like NABCEP.
Can I just continue on that? Because NABCEP standards are embedded in their curriculum. I happen to know that firsthand. Doesn't mean that everybody gets certified through the examination process, but there are two aspects here. One is they're a competency-based curriculum. The whole system is for Colorado Mountain College. But the other thing is Chris has overseen the student installation of panels for 3 libraries supported the grant process with the libraries, et cetera. So in a competency-based system, or a system that would embed industry standards which require demonstration through skill, those seem like those are no-brainers as far as developing either education, certificates, degrees, or training that makes the student worthwhile to the workforce. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the CMC program's unique in my
Oh, okay.
And the hands-on stuff, doing the stuff on the library,
That's
great. We need more of that.
Yeah, and so that could, project like that,
Project-based
that
learning,
that embeds the standards could actually promote that as a nationwide practice.
I think
Great.
the trick, I think, is getting all the internships lined up. Logistics is coming down to it. Because I know that, it's been an initiative of mine at Colorado Mountain College to get more internships going. And sometimes it's, there's a lot of connecting that's required. And so we're trying to hire yet another internship coordinator, because it takes quite a bit of time, but it is critical. Because if they don't have that internship experience, they don't get a job. And because they have to show they can really do it. No one wants to hire a theoretical solar installer. Maybe that works in physics, but not solar installing,
So do you see participation on your advisories by employers as forwarding that?
Absolutely. I think that robust or more volunteers from the community to be on our advisory committees. You're probably on our advisory committee. Or we'd probably call you. No? All right, I need your card. We're going to hound you down.
Get them on there.
But,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Well, maybe we'll take 2. Start with Chris, make it short, please, and then to the gentleman in black. Back.
I just want to say, in terms of learning, and we're here learning, part of what we're doing is we're assembling all these different comments throughout the day. So I could ask a question, but I'm just going to try to give a couple moments of feedback on my notes. I have 2 kids, 10 and 13. They grow up in this community. This is a very odd community. We are surrounded by extraordinary wealth. When we talk about standards, I want to throw out to you, and I heard Cornell and Yale. I love what's happening on the community college level. I feel like we're in a crisis of culture. We don't respect academia. We don't respect intellectualism. We don't have any more theorists, poets, etc. And so, but we do have standards for lawyers, for doctors, for professionals. If all this investment capital is going to really happen, if these institutions are going to get there, make it sexy. Make everybody want to be a technology hedge fund. Make everybody want to be the kind of person that's going to work in this industry instead of just we have enough lawyers, okay? We can sue each other to death. And I just want to say that, having kids, make it sexy. I'll give you one example from my own industry. I spent 25 years in construction management. Every time there is a boom and real estate goes up and construction prices go up, who do we hire? The least qualified people, because they're the only. So I end up hiring lawyers because now they're making $50 an hour as a carpenter because they can tape a hammer on their hand. Make it sexy. Make them want to be there. I say to Dwell Magazine, don't just talk about architects and all the people that build their house by themselves. Oh, it's so green, it's this great. Who hammered the nails? Who put it in? We have to have a respect for work and the value of that, and our economy is skewed in that way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Curtis Scheib, and you know, I've been involved in this for many years, and I think you're right that we're at a critical mass, and there is a ton of information. I mean, Solar Energy International's been teaching this for 25 years. That's where I started. There's lots of other universities and stuff that have curriculum that maybe aren't community college, but my question then, twofold, how are we going to bring all this information together in a critical timeline to actually get it back out to everybody that needs it? And I'm talking from the kindergarten, preschool level to those old folks in the old folks' home that we were talking about earlier. And I've mentioned this before. We have how many environmental organizations that are fighting climate change and all these major issues. But yet we're all tackling, it's the same dilemma. We're all tackling our little piece of the pie. And they're dealing with this, and we're dealing with this wildlife, and we're dealing with that. When it all is interconnected, the problem is interconnected. So how, based on you guys' expertise, how can we bring all of this massive amount of education and knowledge out there in a short time period and be able to push it back out to the people in a way where they can adapt it, as you were saying, as they need or they want to grab this? I think you got 25.
Okay, I think he's saying that how can we accelerate the process at speed and scale necessary to solve the problem? And this is something that, you know, I ask myself every single day on every single level from all of the panels that we have seen from the moment we started till now. So let's go ahead, just right down the line, and then I'm sorry, that's going to have to be it. So,
okay.
Brad?
Yeah, I think that in an ideal world, we'd have a magic wand, and there would be, instead of core standards, we would have it be that we're going to hit a major resocialization of what really matters. And I know reading, writing, and arithmetic matter, but not having too much faith, having been pushed around by people and thinking what education is, I think I have more faith in what was said before is sexy and beautiful as a product. Because if you try to, yes, you try the political thing and try to influence your local school district and things, but there's this nationalization of education, and so you'd have to change the national dialogue to get the curriculum. So it's something that has to be, unfortunately, I think, school district by school district, PTA by PTA. So the CELI approach, what I think kind of makes sense, is saying if we have a product that is just so good and so easy and so slick and so comprehensive, and you can think of products where you think of the games, you know, your Nintendo or whatever, where it's just becomes very pervasive and goes viral, if you will. I think we need something to go viral, essentially. And so what goes viral? Sexy technology.
Okay, we do have on our books a National Environmental Education Act that was signed into law under the first Bush. It's okay. It's surprisingly okay, but people aren't paying attention to it. That's K-12. It'd be fantastic. I would embrace anyone that would want to take on trying to lobby boosting it up, because that is my fantasy. But I don't see it happening anytime soon, so what I'm doing, instead of sitting around lamenting that, I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think what I'm doing needs to be done in every community. I wish. So
Great.
However we can get it out there.
Thank you.
Part of me says go to the city council, write to the paper, but also just a pitch for the Roaring Fork Valley. The Aspen Community Foundation Cradle to Career program has been meeting for 18 months, and this fall there'll be something called Enrichment Wednesdays, which will offer fun classes for K through, I think it's middle school. And the goal, it's after-school workshops on anything that someone wants to propose to this group. So community gardening or, fun in the mud, whatever.
All those things
But one of the, a couple of points of that whole initiative around the Enrichment Wednesdays is bring kids to hope to the future through fun. Fun learning, not what they're getting, not the heavy work they're doing every part of every day, but this other piece. And it seems like that's a really natural match for the kinds of activities you've been doing. So to bring the resource to the director of that and say, hey, who could bring that into the programming is an opportunity.
Great. John?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're going to do an AREDAY Kids. Okay, I got it. That's a whole separate summit, though.
Bring them in with the grown-ups.
I'm with Brad in terms of going around the direct confrontation with the policy. I've trained in Aikido for 25 years, and a lot of times when you push, then they push back, and then you get into a conflict and it escalates. But I think public-private partnerships like the one that is contemplated here with ACELI and Colorado Mountain College, you just do it. You just go out and do. You just have to do the work and get the public-private partnerships, create the great tools, and implement. The hardest thing is the implementation. You can even have a great product, but you have to know how to implement it in schools, and you have to know how students react to that. And so I think you just got to get out there and do the work.
Great. Keelan?
Sometimes I think conflict is the opportunity for positive change, and without conflict, we remain in status quo. So, although I appreciate Aikido myself, it's like sometimes the conflict is the way to go. I think play is secular spirituality, and I think we absolutely should be engaging around that play level and fun, especially in education. If we don't create the desire in them to learn, which was created in me by my grandfather at like 4 or 5, and I'm still on that learning journey, right? It's like everything is going to stop. If we don't do that with the generation that's coming up, and some might argue that there's a generation we failed to do that with, right? Then they're hanging out. So if we don't start to reincorporate that kind of desire around the learning, around the way they implement, how they innovate, well, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And I know this seems off subject, but you notice I'm commenting on things I've heard. And we should not have a separate summit for the kids. The kids should be in this conference, and they should not be a sideshow. We should not use them to come up on stage at, here's the kids moment. They should be involved with us in the sessions in the working group. There should be somebody here from a junior college sitting here, since we're talking about that. There should be somebody here from high school who's thinking about going into college on this panel.
Okay. I hear you, and I get it, and I think you're right, and we're just going to have to make the venue a little bit larger, okay?
Quite possibly,
because
so
I don't know where we would fit them.
homework.
But that said, we can do that. So let's integrate the kids. I think that's a brilliant. Now, my thoughts on concluding this are that we need to integrate government at the highest levels, along with industry, and we need governmental support from the White House. I think that Joe Biden should be stepping up to the plate on this and putting the White House shoulder into it, because we need that kind of leadership from Washington. And maybe if we're going to have gridlock in the in the Senate and the Congress chambers, then maybe we can get some executive action on education that's going to really accelerate that process in partnership with industry and the public. So make this public-private partnerships really what that word means. So I want to thank all of my esteemed panelists for joining me up here and tackling this very difficult issue of education. Thank you.